All right, deep divers, get ready to shrink down with us as we take a look at the making of Ant-Man. We've got some behind-the-scenes footage from a YouTube video and background info from Wikipedia to guide our deep dive. So get ready for a wild ride as we figure out just how this unlikely hero found his place in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
It really is interesting how they took a character from the comics that most people hadn't even heard of and managed to fit him into the MCU so smoothly. I mean, it's impressive.
You know what I think is really funny? It's so easy to forget that Ant-Man was actually one of the original Avengers. Like, he was there from the beginning. Does that change the way you see him in the movies at all?
Yeah, it definitely adds like another layer of complexity.
Yeah.
I think the film does a good job of establishing that legacy through Hank Pym, the original Ant-Man. We get these glimpses into his past and his history with SHIELD, which, is that spy organization within the MCU. And we kind of get to see the events that lead up to him becoming Ant-Man. It's not just about the suit. It's a whole story.
And he doesn't just give that suit to anybody. He very specifically chooses Scott Lang, who you know is his former engineer, with a bit of a criminal past, if we're being honest. Not your typical superhero material, right?
Exactly. And that choice is so intentional. Lang really represents this relatable human struggle for redemption. He's not a god. He's not a billionaire. He's just an average guy who's trying to do the right thing. And that's a theme that resonates throughout the whole movie.
And I think they do a really good job of tying in the film to other things that have happened in the MCU. Like, you've got Avengers, Age of Ultron, and you've even got set up for Captain America, Civil War. It's like Ant-Man is this bridge between these huge moments in the superhero world.
If you take a step back and look at the bigger picture, you see Marvel strategically using this film Ant-Man to create a sense of continuity. Like, they're not just throwing random heroes at us. They're crafting a connected universe. It's pretty amazing.
Okay, so let's talk about the source of Ant-Man's power, the Pym particle. Now, this isn't some magical thing, right? It's not a genetic mutation.
No, it's all about science. The Pym particle is this incredible technology that allows Ant-Man to change his size. And get this, when he shrinks, his strength actually increases.
So he's not just small, he's also super strong. It's like he turns what could be a weakness into his biggest advantage. I love that.
That's what makes Ant-Man so unique. And a little bit of an underdog.
Yeah.
You wouldn't think this tiny guy would pose much of a threat, but then, boom, he's flipping cars and taking down bad guys.
And speaking of unexpected, we can't forget about the whole behind-the-scenes drama that went down making this movie. It was a long and kind of bumpy road to the big screen for Ant-Man. Starting with Edgar Wright, who was originally supposed to direct it.
Right. Edgar Wright, who's known for his comedic style in movies like Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz, he had a very specific vision for Ant-Man. He wanted it to be a standalone comedic action adventure, almost like a heist movie, but with superheroes.
But, of course, as we know, things didn't quite work out that way. Creative differences led to him leaving the project, and Peyton Reed eventually stepped in to direct.
Yeah, it was a very public split, and a lot of fans were disappointed. Wright had been attached to this project for years, and his comedic style seemed like such a good fit for Ant-Man.
But even though Wright didn't end up directing it, do you think some of his initial vision is still there in the final film?
I think so. You can still see bits of his comedic style in the humor and the tone of the movie. It's like a mix of his original vision and what Reed brought to the table.
And then there's the casting of Paul Rudd as Ant-Man. I mean, Paul Rudd, the guy's hilarious, but a superhero. It's not the first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah, it was an unconventional choice for sure.
Yeah.
Rudd was, and I guess still is, mostly known for his comedy roles. But I think the producers saw something more in him. They saw that he has this charm and that ability to make you root for characters even when they're not perfect. They knew he could nail Scott Lang's story of redemption.
And he totally did. You really do feel for Scott throughout the whole movie. Oh, and speaking of transformations, can we talk about Rudd's physique in this film? The guy got ripped.
He really did. Rudd went through this major physical transformation for the role. It was a total departure from what we were used to seeing from him in his comedic roles. Like, he had to change his entire lifestyle, cut out all the fun stuff, and commit to this intense workout routine. It was a big commitment.
There's this interview where he talks about basically giving up all the good food for like a year just to get in shape. It's such a contrast to the goofy characters we usually see him playing who are always snacking and stuff.
Yeah, it really shows how dedicated he was to the roles and his willingness to push himself outside of his comfort zone.
Okay, let's dive into the Ant-Man suit. I love how it's both practical and really faithful to the designs from the comics.
The costume designers did a great job. They drew inspiration from that classic Ant-Man look from the comics.
Mm.
But they also had to make sure the suit was functional, for
Good look.
close-ups and all the crazy stunts.
And it was a good mix of practical effects and CGI.
Exactly. They used real physical suits for a lot of the scenes, but they also used CGI to enhance certain things, especially for those shrinking and growing effects.
And then there's that hilarious story about the suit not having a zipper. Can you imagine being stuck in that thing with no way out?
Yeah, Rudd said it was like an evil Knievel suit. It's just this funny little anecdote that shows that blend of humor and serious stuff that the movie does so well.
Okay, so what really makes Ant-Man stand out from other superhero movies is the heist element. It's this really clever twist. Instead of another world-ending threat, we get this small-scale story that's all about this intricate heist.
It's definitely a refreshing change of pace. And it adds this layer of fun and unpredictability. And the casting of Michael Pena as Louis Scott Lang's fast-talking buddy was perfect for that. Pena brings such a unique energy to the film.
Oh my gosh, his tip montages are the best. They're so chaotic, but you just can't help but hang on every word.
His storytelling style is so perfect for that heist narrative. It's almost like they took a typical superhero origin story and injected it with Ocean's 11.
Okay, I gotta ask, what did you think of the macro photography in this film? It's incredible. It's like you're actually shrunk down with Ant-Man seeing the world from his perspective.
The macro photography in Ant-Man is truly groundbreaking. The filmmakers really pushed the limits of visual effects. They wanted to create this realistic, immersive experience to make you believe you're right there with Ant-Man.
It's amazing when you think about the challenges involved in filming at that scale. Even the smallest shake of the camera could ruin the illusion.
Exactly. They had to overcome so many technical difficulties, like controlling for those vibrations and capturing all those details of this tiny world. It required specialized lenses, special lighting, and a lot of attention to detail.
It's like they invented a whole new way of filmmaking just for this movie.
They did. And they managed to blend practical sets with CGI seamlessly. That really shows the skill and artistry of the visual effects team.
And you can't forget those scenes where he falls into the bathtub and it's like a tidal wave from his perspective.
Those little details are what make the film so engaging and immersive. You're constantly seeing familiar things from a totally different point of view.
It's amazing to me that they actually consulted with entomologists, ant experts, to make sure those ant scenes were accurate.
Yeah, it's amazing. It shows their commitment to making things feel authentic, even when it comes to something as small as the way ants behave.
And who could forget about Hope Van Dyne, played by the incredible Evangeline Lilly? She's such a badass. She's not just some damsel in distress waiting to be rescued.
Absolutely not. Hope is smart and capable and can definitely hold her own. She's a skilled fighter, a key part of PIM Technologies, and she plays a huge role in helping Scott become Ant-Man. She's not just a love interest, she's a force to be reckoned with.
And their relationship isn't all perfect and happy either. She has a complicated relationship with her father, Hank Pym.
Yeah, their dynamic adds another layer of depth to the movie. Hope is still dealing with the pain of losing her mother, Janet, who disappeared into this weird subatomic place called the quantum realm years ago.
Okay, hold on. The quantum realm. What is that all about? It sounds like something straight out of science fiction.
It is pretty trippy. Think of it like the MCU's version of the microverse. It's this bizarre place where the laws of physics don't apply. It's not just about shrinking. It's about exploring whole new dimensions.
So Ant-Man isn't just a superhero, he's like a cosmic explorer.
Exactly. And the film doesn't just introduce the quantum realm, it kind of teases that it will be important in future films. It's like they're planting seeds that will grow into something much bigger later on.
And I'm guessing this has something to do with Janet Van Dyne disappearing. It's like a big mystery hanging over the whole movie.
You're definitely picking up on something there. The movie hints at what might have happened to Janet and the possibility of rescuing her from the quantum realm. It's something we're left to think about.
And speaking of thinking about things, I think it's time for us to take a little break, but we'll be back to explore all the other aspects of Ant-Man that we haven't covered yet.
Definitely. We'll be back in a flash. Don't go anywhere.
We're back and ready to dig even deeper into Ant-Man. Before the break, we were talking about the mysteries of the quantum realm. It's this crazy subatomic world that wasn't actually in Edgar Wright's original vision. It feels like the filmmakers really opened up a whole new world of possibilities, not just for Ant-Man, but for the whole MCU.
It's so cool how they gave this seemingly small-scale superhero access to something so big and cosmic, like they gave him the keys to the entire universe. Literally.
And it's not just a visual thing or just part of the plot. The movie hints that the quantum realm will be important in future movies. It's like setting the stage for something much bigger. It makes you wonder what other secrets and possibilities are hidden in this subatomic world.
Yeah, and we get a little peek at that in the post-credit scene. Hank Pym shows his daughter Hope a prototype wasp suit. It's a big moment that suggests she might follow in her mom's footsteps and become a superhero too.
So it's not just about Ant-Man. It's about family and legacy and new heroes coming onto the scene. And speaking of family, that father-daughter relationship between Hank and Hope is so interesting. It's not all sunshine and roses. There's definitely some tension and unresolved pain there.
Yeah, their relationship is definitely complicated. Hope is still angry with Hank for the loss of her mother Janet, who disappeared into the quantum realm. It adds this emotional layer to the movie that goes beyond the usual superhero stuff.
It makes you wonder if part of the reason Hank trains Scott Lang is to make up for his past mistakes, and maybe even find a way to rescue Janet from the quantum realm.
It's definitely possible. Hank seems to feel guilty and regretful throughout the whole movie. He's carrying the weight of what happened in the past, and maybe he sees training Scott as a way to redeem himself.
Okay, let's switch gears a bit and go back to something we talked about earlier, the heist element. I love how it takes a typical superhero story and adds this element of suspense and intrigue. It's not just about saving the world, it's about pulling off this really complicated and dangerous robbery.
It's a smart way to make the story feel more grounded and relatable. The heist itself is pretty complex, breaking into Pym Technologies to steal the Yellow Jacket suit from Darren Cross.
Oh yeah, Darren Cross. He's like Hank Pym's former student turned enemy, right?
Exactly. Cross represents the dark side of Pym's genius. He's obsessed with copying Pym's shrinking technology and using it as a weapon for his own benefit. He's driven by greed, and he'll do anything to get what he wants.
And that's where the Yellow Jacket suit comes in. It's like a weaponized version of the Ant-Man suit. It's like Ant-Man's evil twin.
Right. It creates this really cool conflict. You've got Ant-Man who's using his powers for good, trying to stop Cross from unleashing this dangerous technology.
Yeah.
It's a classic battle of good versus evil, but with a shrinking twist.
And the action scenes are so cool and visually amazing. We see Ant-Man fighting Yellow Jacket on a toy train set, shrinking down to fight inside a briefcase, even riding on a flying ant.
They really used Ant-Man's size-changing abilities to make these memorable and creative action sequences. It's not just about explosions and superpowers. It's about using the environment and Ant-Man's powers in really smart and unexpected ways.
And they don't shy away from humor, even during those intense action scenes. Like there's that scene where Ant-Man gets flushed down the toilet. It's hilarious and terrifying at the same time.
That's a great example of how the film balances humor and action. It reminds you that even though the stakes are high, there's still room for fun and lighthearted moments. It's what makes Ant-Man such a unique and enjoyable superhero film.
And speaking of fun, one of the best parts of the movie is Michael Peña as Luis. His fast-talking storytelling is just pure comedic gold. Those tip montages where he retells events in his own way are so funny.
Yeah, he brings so much energy to the film.
Yeah.
His character Luis isn't just a sidekick. He's a fully developed character with his own quirks and charm. And the way he tells stories is perfect for the whole heist narrative. It adds this layer of humor and a little bit of chaos to everything.
It's really cool how a movie like Ant-Man could have been just a silly throwaway superhero movie. But it's actually both entertaining and thought-provoking. There are these deeper themes of redemption and second chances and family that really stick with you.
You're right. It goes beyond the usual superhero stuff and explores these deeper ideas that give it more weight. It's a story about a flawed hero trying to do better, a father trying to connect with his daughter, and what happens when ambition goes too far.
And it's all wrapped up in this fun, action-packed adventure with amazing special effects. It's a well-made film that doesn't take itself too seriously.
And I think that's one of the reasons why people liked it so much. It's a superhero movie that's not afraid to be funny and lighthearted, but it still delivers on the action and the emotional moments.
It reminds us that sometimes the most unexpected heroes can make the biggest impact. Speaking of impact, let's talk about that fight between Ant-Man and Falcon. It's one of the best-looking sequences in the whole film, and it shows us just how powerful Ant-Man can be.
That fight scene is amazing. It's so well choreographed, and the visual effects are incredible. It's amazing how they use his shrinking ability to create these super dynamic and unpredictable fight scenes. He's not just a brute. He's using his size and his agility to his advantage, outsmarting his opponent.
And it's not just a random fight scene for no reason. It actually serves a purpose in the bigger MCU story.
Right. It establishes Ant-Man as someone to be reckoned with, even against an Avenger like Falcon. It hints at his future with the Avengers and sets up his role in Captain America: Civil War.
It's like Ant-Man is this sneaky little movie that sets up some big things for the MCU. It's not just a standalone story. It's a crucial part of a much bigger puzzle.
Yeah, it really shows how good Marvel is at weaving these interconnected stories across different movies. They're not just making individual films, they're building this huge interconnected universe.
And they do it in a way that feels natural and interesting. Speaking of interesting, I have to say I'm always impressed by the music in this film. It's so playful and whimsical. It captures the tone of the movie perfectly. It's not your typical loud and dramatic superhero score.
Yeah, the score is definitely one of the best things about the movie. It's quirky and fun, and it adds this layer of charm to everything. It's like the music version of Ant-Man Small but Mighty.
It's awesome how much detail and thought went into every part of this film. They could have just made another generic superhero movie, but they made something really unique and special.
It shows the vision of the filmmakers and their dedication to making something fresh and original. They took a character that most people didn't even know and turned him into a cinematic gem.
And speaking of gems, we can't forget to mention Michael Douglas as Hank Pym. He's such a legend, and he brings so much weight to the role.
Douglas is perfect as Pym. He really captures all sides of the character.
Yeah.
His brilliance, his ego, his vulnerability, and his regrets. Hank is a complex character haunted by the mistakes he's made, and Douglas plays him with such depth.
There's that cool flashback scene where we see a younger Hank Pym in action as Ant-Man. It's cool how they worked him into the history of the MCU.
Yeah, that flashback scene is important. It helps us understand Pym's past and what motivates him. We
Yeah.
see who he was, what he believed in, and how he became Ant-Man.
It's interesting how at first Pym just sees Scott Lang as a tool to get what he wants. But as the movie goes on, their relationship becomes something more. There's this sense of mentorship and almost a fatherly feeling between them.
It's a really nice part of the movie. You see these two characters from totally different worlds, finding common ground and learning from each other.
It reminds us that even the most unexpected pairings can lead to growth and change. Okay, before we get too lost in the quantum realm of technical stuff, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll explore the lasting impact of Ant-Man on the MCU and beyond.
Sounds good. We'll be right back, ready to dive into the legacy of this tiny but mighty hero. Don't go anywhere.
We're back, folks, ready to wrap up our epic deep dive into Ant-Man. We've explored the story, the characters, and even took a quick trip into the mind-bending quantum realm. But before we go back to full size, I gotta talk about those awesome shrinking and growing effects. They're so smooth and convincing, it's almost like magic. But I know there's a ton of science and technology behind it.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
It's not as simple as making something look bigger or smaller. They had to make it look like a seamless transformation, and Ant-Man did a great job of that. They used a mix of practical effects, CGI, and this cool technology called centroid facial motion capture to make it all work.
Okay, I gotta ask, what exactly is centroid facial motion capture?
It's basically a way to capture the actor's facial performance even when they're not actually on set, or when their characters change digitally. So, for example, they used it to get Paul Rudd's expressions and mannerisms even when Ant-Man was tiny, like the size of an ant.
So they scanned his face and used that data to make a CGI Ant-Man that still felt like Paul Rudd.
That's insane. Exactly.
Yeah.
They were able to keep Rudd's comedic timing and all those little facial expressions that make him so great, even when he was shrunk down. It's not just about shrinking the body, it's about shrinking the performance, too.
It's wild how technology can do that now. Shrinking an actor's performance along with the character, it's like science fiction coming to life.
It really is. And Ant-Man is a great example of how filmmakers are using visual effects to tell stories in new and interesting ways. It's not just about making things look cool. It's about using technology to make the story better.
And speaking of looking cool, we can't forget about that epic scene where Ant-Man becomes a giant and busts out of that building. Pure cinematic gold.
That scene was such a good blend of practical and digital effects. They built part of the set to scale so they could film Paul Rudd interacting with it. Then they used CGI to make the set bigger and create the illusion of Ant-Man's size.
It's amazing how well they blended the practical and digital stuff. You can't even tell where one ends and the other begins.
It really shows how talented the visual effects artists are. They're like digital magicians, creating these illusions that take us to different worlds.
It's crazy to think about how far superhero movies have come since the old days of cheesy costumes and bad special effects. Now we have films like Ant-Man that can make us believe a man can shrink and grow and even ride a flying ant.
Yeah, it's amazing to see what they can do now. It shows the power of imagination and how technology keeps getting better. Filmmakers are always trying new things and creating these incredible experiences that take us to places we never thought possible.
And Ant-Man is a perfect example of that. It's a film that takes this unique idea and creates something really special. It's funny, action-packed, heartwarming, and visually stunning. What more could you ask for?
It reminds us that even the smallest heroes can have a huge impact. And sometimes those ideas that seem silly or crazy can turn into the best and most memorable stories.
So what does all this mean for you, our dedicated listener? Ant-Man shows us that even the most unexpected ideas can be amazing when they're done with care, humor, and imagination. It encourages us to embrace the unexpected, to find the extraordinary in the ordinary, and to never underestimate the power of a good story, no matter how small it might seem.
As you keep watching all these superhero movies, remember to look for those little details, those moments of creativity that make a film truly great.
And on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive into Ant-Man. We hope you've enjoyed shrinking down with us and exploring the world of Marvel's smallest hero. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep on deep diving.